Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow, it's so dark out here, Tim, that you can hear the crickets and boy, there's some gravel over here. Jesus, it's really pitch black. You think we'll see anything strange tonight? We're not always successful when we go to sky watching.
Well, you never know. Though, what do you think that giant triangle is that's coming our way? Seems to be getting awful close.
You mean the one that's stopping overhead?
Yeah.
If we hadn't been looking up, we might have missed it. It's not making a damn sound.
No, sure it isn't. Could it be one of those back-engine aircraft they're testing out at Area 51?
Better go inside the KCOR radio studio. Tina told us to keep off the extraterrestrial highway.
Oh. All right, well, I hope it doesn't catch us. It's getting mighty close. We better speed up. Let's go.
All right. Okay. I'm having a little out of breath. Oh, boy. Okay, here comes that triangle. But it won't, it might not get us, I hope. Ooh, that was a close call.
Mm-hmm.
Every week we seem to have a close call. I don't know how we manage to get out of all these situations.
It's either us or the listeners having a close call.
Well, I'm sure they can't wait for another exciting episode, and we got one tonight, don't we, Tim?
Yes, we do. I'm really. I love it when we can get some of our best guests back on again, and tonight is no exception. We have with us once again our good friend Ben EMLYN-JONES, and then
that's Ben the Porter.
Ben the Porter, that's right.
Yeah. Get down with the New World Order. Right on, yeah.
Well, and also with us tonight is Michael SCHRATT, who's also making a return visit to Exploring the Bizarre. So for those out there who don't remember, now we'll start with Ben. Now, Ben is a research blogger and filmmaker on controversial subjects on his blog website, HPANWO, which stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. That sounds like the title for a really great movie. I'd go and watch that.
Well, all the hospital porters that I know over here are in favor of the New World Order, let me tell
you. Well, now, Ben's website is dedicated to the latest news, views, and reviews of the world of government cover-up, ghosts, UFOs, paranormal investigation, hidden knowledge, forbidden history and archaeology, chemtrails, and even hospital porters, even though Ben, I guess, has ventured away from that job now. But he also posts videos containing his political comments and often uses satirical characters to get his point across. Now, Ben worked as a hospital porter for 22 years and had a exemplary record until being suspended because of the material he posted on his blog's website. We've heard this story before. With that behind him, he continues to support hospital porters and other NHS employees, in addition to his tireless research in areas that far too many clearly fear to tread. Now, Ben gives lectures about these touchy subjects at events all around the United Kingdom. Also with us tonight, as I said before, is Michael SCHRATT. Now, Michael is a military aerospace historian and has lectured across the country on the unique subject of mystery aircraft, which is one of my favorite subjects, and my first book published through Global Communications dealt with secret black budget
Wow,
project aircrafts.
That's been a while ago.
Yeah, that has been. I got off track here, but Michael's interest includes classified propulsion systems that are buried deep within the military-industrial complex, and he has developed a number of contacts which have had firsthand experience dealing with classified black programs, including former United States Air Force pilots, retired Navy personnel, and aerospace engineers that have maintained a top-secret SCI security clearance. And in an effort to expose government fraud, waste, and abuse, Michael devotes much of his free time researching aerospace technical documents, conducting interviews, and traveling to multiple university archives. And as a concerned citizen, it's his belief that it is our constitutional obligation to question authority and demand an accounting of special access programs that bypass congressional oversight and public scrutiny, and I'm all for that. So, Michael, Ben, thank you very much for being with us on Exploring the Bizarre.
Hi, Sam.
There
How's
we
it going?
go. All right, we're all here hanging out in different parts of the world, actually, or maybe
That's right.
maybe places that aren't part of the world. Hey, Michael, you know what? I wanted to kick off here. Recently, it's not that recently now. It's over a year ago. The New York Times and a lot of the other media had this report in there about the military running a black op project to study UFOs, kind of behind the scenes, even though they claim that the Project Blue Book was closed and that was the end of it. We find out now, as if we couldn't have guessed it, that they really have continued their studies. Now, a part of this these revelations were the release of several videos, maybe gun camera footage. I'm not exactly sure what circumstances that they were taken under. Would you consider this? Well, what do you think about the report in general of this Black Ops project that continues to continue to go on, and how does it kind of tie in with your research?
Good question. Thanks again for having me on the program.
Yes.
The best way I can answer that is to always refer back to Lockheed Skunkworks, because it certainly appears that all roads lead back to the Burbank Skunkworks. A good friend of mine, Jim Goodall, personally knew Ben Rich. Ben Rich was the head of Skunkworks between 1975 to 1991. Ben passed away in 95. Just prior to Ben's passing, Jim got a telephone call into Ben Rich, and Ben Rich basically told Jim Goodall over the phone, quote, "Jim, we have things in the Nevada desert that are 50 years beyond what you can comprehend. If you've seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've been there, done that, or decided it wasn't worth the effort." So when we hear about these strange craft being attempted to be intercepted by F-18 pilots, we cannot underestimate Ben's statement, because that's well within that 50 years that Ben was talking about. So all bets are off regarding these configurations.
Now, but would not the military pilots, I guess they are not the military pilots so much, because obviously they're not going to know what's going on, but the fellow who was behind this project, would he not be familiar with some of these things that are taking place probably out at Area 51 or some other sealed off locations?
It's debatable, even if some of the House and Armed Services Committee members have a need to know. Some of the deep black classified programs going on at the Skunkworks were so darn black that they were born black, they died black, and they will remain black. You'll never hear anything about it. Quick example, and this is in Ben Rich's book, Skunkworks. There was an incident where a general by the name of Robert Bond, who was basically a part of the F-117A program, he was getting very concerned that resources were being taken off his F-117 program and put onto a classified Navy program. Well, he saw this particular lock at the Skunkworks in Burbank, and he knew that it was associated with a Navy project because he was at the Pentagon and he was familiar with those programs. And so what he did is he demanded Ben Rich to open up this door at the Skunkworks, and Ben said, nope, you can't do it because you're not cleared for it. And this general came back to Ben and said, Ben, if you don't open up that door right now, I'm going to take an axe and I'm going to break into there. He finally got into there, and there was a number of naval personnel working on the Sea Shadow. So here's a good example. You have a U.S. Air Force general who was not briefed about another Skunkworks program going into the Skunkworks at the same time the F-117A is. So they do compartmentalize these programs.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a timely question. The elderly Mr. Bush, of course, passed away.
Yeah.
And he, among his duties, he was head of the CIA for a period of time. There is rumor floating around that he would know about either such projects, or maybe the only one or few of those to know about such projects. And if there was anything to Roswell or some of these other UFO crashes, he might be among the handful that were privy to such information. Would you agree on that, or what is your thinking?
I absolutely agree on that. He's one of the three people I think do know. So it's George Herbert Walker Sr. Bush, I believe, knew a good portion of it, Dick Cheney, and then Bill Perry as well. So three individuals who probably have a need to know and know a lot more than we do.
Well, why the big secret? I mean, okay, I could see we don't want to tip off. I was going to say the Russians, but they seem to be our buddies these days. We don't want to rip off some of the NATO or some of the or Britain maybe. We don't want to tip off those that we don't want to tip off, which may change on a regular basis, about some of these secret projects. But isn't it, if we did tip people off to this or other countries off to this, wouldn't this be kind of a deterrent? More than, I mean, if they knew that we had things that were 50 years ahead of what is commonly acknowledged, you'd think that they would be, not so easy to relax.
Mm-hmm. I see your point, and I do agree with that. One quick thing to keep in mind is one reason why they keep these programs black is because he who controls the high ground controls the world. So if you can control the high ground in a battlefield, you absolutely control the world. And some of the programs that, hopefully we'll talk about this evening fall under a couple of different categories. They have some terminology they actually use. These are actual spook terms they use within the industry. These programs are called silver bullets. They're also known as trump card technology. And they're also known as ace in the hole technology as well. So if we have a very specific strategic target we want to take out, we'll send in one of our quote-unquote silver bullets, like the F-117A, to neutralize the target and be done with it.
Well, have we done that?
We certainly have done that. But to keep in mind, too, though, is this really all begins, to go back in time here. The Newsweek, June 8th, 1981, they highlighted in their article, between 1981 and 1986, during this 5-year Reagan buildup period, we spent $1.5 trillion on military defense. And then later on, Aviation Week Space Technology stated that 8 years of Reagan administration were very good to the black world. That was December 24th, 1990. So you can see this Reagan buildup had this exponential growth within black programs, and certainly we hope to talk about some of those tonight.
Okay, so we've ascertained that it could be, or it may be, that some of these things that we see in the sky that our pilots even chase could be ours. But does that leave out the fact that some of them could not be ours?
No,
may not be ours?
I believe that there is a core of reality to this phenomenon. Not everything out there is a black budget program. Absolutely.
Did we copy it from? Is it back engineered?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the $64 million question. I don't have enough to bridge that gap. I don't know who does. I've heard the rumors. They're good stories, but there's no physical evidence or really good paper trail to break that down to bridge that gap. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I personally don't have enough.
Well, okay, we opened the show here with a little vaudeville skit that we do every week, kind of lampooning the triangle sightings. But one of the best reports of boomerang triangle, well, two of them would be the Phoenix Lights, of course, and the other one would be the Westchester sightings back in the 80s. What's your take on the Phoenix Lights? I mean, this thing traveled, 300 miles down the highway and hovered and made no sound, and may or may not have been photographed. I don't know if the events later on in the night were flares or not flares, or I don't know. What's your digest of the Phoenix Lights? Okay,
quick question. Do you recall March 13th, 1997, what day that was?
Not offhand.
Okay. It was
I know. It's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was a Thursday. March 24th, 1983 was a Thursday. I've got multiple reports of the quote-unquote aurora booming the Los Angeles area, always on a Thursday and always the last Thursday of the month. And this goes on and on and on all the way through the Reagan administration up until late 1990s, maybe early 2000s. So it appears that there's a pattern recognition here. And we're talking about test flights of classified aircraft on Thursday nights, at least on a Thursday. And we can really pin this down because we've got the testimony from people. You mentioned the Hudson Valley boomerang that was 82 to 89. We're looking at 25,000 eyewitnesses reported this massive boomerang-shaped craft.
Quite a few, yeah.
Yep. Hovered almost silently over the Taconic State Parkway. People who were directly below it reported seeing tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of the craft. They also reported multicolored flashing lights that went off in sequence. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is the same type mechanical understructure that we've seen on the Belgium Triangle. That's 1989, 1990. Getting back to Phoenix Lights, people who said they saw this craft said it was transparent or translucent. You could see through it. And this goes back to the Air Force 2025 report talking about an airborne holographic projection technology. So that's what we could be looking at with the...
Well, but okay. Now you take the Westchester sightings. Actually, I just ran into someone a couple of months ago who had seen the object. He was working at a hotel there on the Hudson River where I was staying, and we chatted for briefly. But now, if you go back into history of the Westchester Valley, you'll find that there were sightings and odd things going on in that area long before the Wright brothers and
that's
so
right.
forth. And the same, of course, in various parts of the West and the Southwest. If you go back to 1897 or before that, even you get reports of strange objects in the sky. Some of which even had humanoid pilots that landed and chatted up ranchers and farmers and the average guy in the streets. So, I mean, I don't think it's unless the black projects include time travel, which somebody might suggest that it possibly does. You got to admit that these strange things that are seen in the sky go back long before the CIA or Area 51.
Yep, I agree. Linda Zimmerman did a really good job.
Oh yeah,
with pre-historical cases of ufology, early 1900s, long before the Reagan administration, long before Kelly Johnson got the Skunkworks. So I agree with you. They don't appear to be all man-made craft.
Any chance that there might be some revelation at some point in the future?
On a black program within the aerospace industry?
Yeah. What would be the next thing breaking that we might? I mean, at some
Sure.
point you would think that, well, we got to let the cat out of the bag. I mean, you can't hold this withhold this information for what forever.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the purpose? Yeah.
Yep. We're way overdue for a revelation. The last classified program that was declassified, put within the public domain, was October 2002 during the Bush administration with the Boeing Phantom Works bird of prey. That was the last black aircraft program they acknowledged. That was a manned program. There is at least 12 other programs out there that were procured during the Reagan administration that have never been declassified. So there's still some birds out there that we don't know about.
And what do they do that the birds that we know about? What do they do that the birds that we know about don't do? I mean, what makes them so? What makes them so more powerful? Why? What do they do? I mean, what's their operational?
Well, anytime they let something go, it's already 1 to 2 generations obsolete at that time. So when they decommissioned the F-117 in 2008, they already had something else flying at that time. I'll give you a quick example. There is something out there called the A-16. It's a Mach 4 strike reconnaissance aircraft, and it has a very interesting feature that has drooping wingtips that has still not been acknowledged. And I got some good information on that particular bird. Couple of quick announcements while we're all here. I'm offering, and I hope all of you received the PDF files that I sent you. I'm offering a $5,000 cash prize for anyone who can complete my Ben Rich F-117A stealth fighter crossword puzzle, and then another $5,000 cash prize for anyone who can complete my B-2 stealth bomber crossword puzzle by 11:59 p.m. this Sunday night.
Well, okay. Well, I'll be sharpening my pencil, my number 2 pencil, right after the show. I heard. And I don't remember how many years ago, 6-7 years ago. And it was on the news maybe once or twice about some aircraft that had traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast in 20 minutes or something like that. But then you never heard anything more about it. I mean, that would be incredibly fast.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way. In 1990, we retired the SR-71. Okay, that's a matter of a historical fact. Then later on in 1994, it came out of retirement. We should ask the question, why did they bring the Blackbird out of retirement? I don't want to read too much here, but let me hit you with a statement by...
all right, before...
Because we've got a break coming up here.
Yep, well, we'll be right back to continue this conversation on Exploring the Bizarres.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Right now, we're talking with Michael SCHRATT, and in just a few minutes, we'll bring Ben EMLYN-JONES, Ben the Porter, into the conversation. But I wanted to allow Michael to continue his thought because we had to interrupt him and go to our break. So, Michael, Tim Beckley had asked you about an aircraft that he had heard had, made it from coast to coast in 20 minutes, and you were referencing I think it was the Blackbird.
Yeah, this is a statement by Richard Helms, ex-CIA director. He says, the national security demands that we keep supplying new generations of surveillance aircraft to our policy makers. There is no way to replace the vital data provided by piloted airplanes. Satellites lack the flexibility and the immediacy that only a spy plane like the U-2 can provide. No president or intelligence agency with only one eye open in such an uncertain and dangerous basically what he's saying here. So to me personally, I think this is the Rosetta Stone for a quote-unquote Aurora-type reconnaissance aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, considering that the aircraft that you're referring to was originally put into operation in what was the early 1960s, is that correct?
1962 was the A-12, 1964 was the SR-71.
So, I mean, considering how far back that was, I mean, the advances in technology that we have now are probably unbelievable.
Absolutely. Let me hit you with another quick thing here. This is to Ben Rich, Lockheed Skunkworks director, from John Andrews, date October 23rd, 1989. Quote, back end of something on taxiway at Groom Lake. Low frequency, very high amplitude vibration, even at idle, shook the sides of the bus. Uses 20,000 feet of runway to roll out. Mach 10 liquid methane fuel. So we've got more than one report of lack of the aircraft. This is also confirmed by Aviation Week as well.
All right. Well, okay. Now, before we bring Ben in, I wanted to ask you because you were talking earlier about some of these sightings taking place on a Thursday. Now, why is Thursday significant?
Okay, Thursday is significant because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is pre-flight. Thursday's the test flight. Friday's debrief. Saturday, Sunday, there's nobody there. That's why Thursday has almost always been reserved for test flights.
So then a lot of these sightings of especially, like boomerang and black triangles occur on a Thursday because this is when they take them out and run them through their paces.
That's correct.
All right. So then, why do they run them through their paces over populated areas with these big, bright, flashing lights, strobes, different colors? You have these triangular shaped craft with like a big spotlight in the middle. There are bright lights on either end. I mean, it's almost like they're screaming, "Here I am, look at me."
That's correct. One, just looking at it from my perspective, one reason might be is they're trying to use the quote-unquote extraterrestrial phenomenon to cover their own deep black programs. And then when there is a sighting of one of these, what they use is the supermarket tabloids as a way to cover their own black aircraft test flights.
There are no more supermarket tabloids.
At least not reporting on UFOs. Well, and that makes sense because you know as well as I do that there are a lot of people that if you start talking about UFOs, their eyes glaze over, and that's it for them. So you could be flying around practically any kind of top secret craft, and as long as that UFO extraterrestrial name has somehow gotten latched onto it, people aren't going to believe it.
The way it was described to me is that we're dealing with a 400-piece puzzle, but we only have 200 of the pieces. And the CIA has used this strategy of denial for 50 years. Why stop now? So they're going to continue to muddy the waters when something is actually seen.
All right. Well, okay. Now, Ben, you've been listening to this conversation, and I know for a fact that the UK has. I mean, they experienced a number of black triangle flaps in the past. I mean, so listening to what Michael is saying, I mean, do you think that a majority of these sightings are some kind of top secret black magic aircraft or whatever?
Well, it's I don't know about proportions, but I do I think that's certainly a possibility for some some of these particular sightings. For example, the Sheffield incident. I don't know if Michael's heard of that one, but that's a very large object actually. Some people describe it as the size of a ship at sea, an ocean-going ship. Actually flew over the city of Sheffield and the surrounding area, and it was a black equilateral triangle in profile, which is interesting considering that these things have been seen as Belgium. Michael mentioned Belgium and several other places. I think there appear to be some that don't appear to exhibit behaviour you'd expect from an aircraft, from a man-made aircraft, for instance, hovering over houses, and sometimes they're seen in association with beings, strange beings, and things like that. But it's quite likely that we're looking at two separate phenomena we may have generically categorised together. And it's pretty obvious that we're living in a world where it's essentially bifurcated between the ordinary folk and the interior of the state industrial corporate complex, where they essentially live in what Richard Dolan calls a breakaway civilization. I mean, this kind of technology is extraordinary, and we're so far ahead of what's publicly available that it takes your breath away. I mean, I've had to think about this an awful lot, and I've studied some of Michael's work because I've just finished writing a trilogy of novels, a fictional scenario of what would happen if some of this esoteric technology became publicly available. So it's been a big part of my thought process for many years now, and I'm fascinated by it. Interestingly, there's a new hangar at Area 51. I was looking up about this just a couple of years ago, and it was reported by some of the Area 51 watchers that this was a very big, tall hangar, it was right at the other end of the runway, away from the main hangars and buildings, as if they either wanted to keep it secret, or it maybe have some kind of volatile fuel that they wanted to keep separate for safety reasons from the rest of the facility. And this may be the aircraft that Michael was talking about. It was the what did you call it, Michael? Not the A-10. That was the old spy plane. The one with the drooping wings.
This could be associated with the Black Star program.
It could be that. It's a very large hangar, one of the largest ever built, and it's very tall, as if this thing might have a very tall tailplane rather than the flat profile of the flat look of, say, the B-1 stealth bomber. So I'm interested to know if we find out more information about that.
Well, I do know that the United States and Great Britain have been involved in top secret aircraft research and development for a number of years. I know that there was a document that was handed over, and Michael, you'll have to remind me what the name of this was. That was based on information that was taken from Nazi Germany after the end of the war, collected together. I think it was handed over in the 1960s, something like that.
Yeah, well done. That's well done. It was called the Dawson Report.
That's it. Okay. All right. Dawson Report. Are you familiar with that one, Ben?
No, I'm not. I'm familiar with Operation Paperclip, which was much earlier. I mean, this was at the end of World War II, but not the Dawson Report, no.
Okay, so what's Michael want to tell us what the Dawson Report is? Yeah,
the reference for this is Jane's Defense Weekly, September 4th, 1996, A Relationship Under Wraps, U.S. and U.K. Stealth. And what they talk about here is that there is an ongoing strong relationship between the aerospace industry of the U.S. and U.K. It's been going on for years. It's very strong. They reference something called the Dawson Report, which was basically something that was put together by the UK after all of the intelligence agencies started basically vacuuming up Nazi stealth technology. That was put into 3-ring binders and given to the Washington, D.C. sometime after the Kennedy administration. That's what the article states anyway.
Interesting. So I think it was in the early 1990s, Ben, that there had been a number of Black Triangle UFO sightings, over Great Britain, and it got to the point where I think the government and you have to correct me on this so I get it wrong. They had to put on what is it? Is it D notice, M notice onto the press to stop them from reporting on it?
I don't know if specifically a D notice was sent out, but I do know that there have been many, many sightings of various strange objects in the sky, which have not been reported in full by the media, yet they do circulate within the UFO field among independent researchers, and also that many of the witnesses are very credible people. Some of them have experienced events which have changed their lives, and they've some of them have suffered enormously in terms of their career, but they still speak out about it. There's been several pilots have mentioned this, and several military personnel. There's one chap I know who used to be in the Royal Air Force. He essentially saw the Sheffield object when he was on duty in the Royal Air Force, and it's essentially changed his life. It's like something amazing happened, and he's developed an interest in the subject. So it's kind of like an open secret, really, in our country, certainly. And Britain has more than its fair share of UFO sightings. The black triangle.
How about the Bentwaters there?
Well, of course, the Bentwaters, the Woodbridge Bentwaters base, the site of the Rendlesham Forest incident, that's got to be one of the most famous UFO events in the entire world. This was in 1980 at Christmas time. There was a number of U.S. Air Force personnel. At that time, it was an American base. Saw some very strange things in the woods, and on a number of successive evenings in night time. Very strange case indeed, and a lot's been written about this. A lot's been said about it, and there's a lot of controversy associated with it. But obviously, something very odd happened in those few days in that particular wood near those two bases.
Well, and I don't know if you knew this, but I think it was the day before the first Bentwater sighting, you had the Cash Landrum incident that happened in Texas.
That's an odd coincidence, isn't it? I mean, they're on two separate sides of the world. I know that the ladies involved in that particular event, I mean, they suffered health problems as a result of their encounter. And strangely enough, some of the witnesses to the Rendlesham Forest incident have also suffered health problems too, as if there's some effect, some property of these objects affects human health, maybe through ionizing radiation, maybe for some other mechanism we're not familiar with. But they are ill, these guys, a lot of them.
Well, to throw in a plug for our own work here, we have a book called UFO Hostilities, the aliens' evil agenda. And we have many reports in there where witnesses have been burned or undergone some detrimental procedure or incident after their sighting or encounter. There possibly might have been even some human mutilations. I don't know how well documented they necessarily are, but there are some cases that seem to point in that direction. I mean, it certainly seems that our own governments would not be testing such volatile objects in an area where they might hurt our own citizens. Now, of course, Cash Landrum, which is a very interesting case. In this incident, we had two, a mother and daughter, and then a grandson saw this object come pretty low over their automobile in the rural area in Texas there. But what makes the sighting probably even more bizarre is the fact that they reported that this object, which was diamond shaped in this particular case, was escorted by about 20 black helicopters. Now, how does that tie in? I mean, does that prove that this diamond shaped object that apparently injured some of our own citizens was something that was manufactured right here?
It doesn't. I'm not sure. It could do. It could mean the black helicopters could have been actually in some way intercepting or monitoring something that came from somewhere else. Either possibility is real. And I wouldn't like to actually speculate on the moral scruples of the government, quite frankly, because
okay, Porter. Okay,
but you know,
okay, Porter. Go ahead, Porter. Yes,
I'll tell you. I'll tell you that it's whatever these craft are. I mean, when people become sick in their vicinity, it could be a result of some kind of weapon. It could be a deliberate intent on the part of whoever or whatever is behind that, the technology of the object being observed, or it could be an inadvertent effect of the properties of being there. It could be just accidental.
Or even more outlandish. We do have some cases. In fact, we've had a fellow on our program a couple of times, Dr. Bruce Cornett, but other witnesses have reported too the morphing of objects where UFOs can change shape, and sometimes perhaps in the shape of helicopters or airplanes, or I mean, there's some speculation, and I don't know what evidence you see in this, that the planes that hit the World Trade Center may not have been planes at all. I don't know. It's another mystery,
Yeah, funny enough, I've just been talking to someone who's got in touch with me, and they said that they've had many encounters with what you might call UFOs and extraterrestrial beings in their life, and they've also were chased by helicopters at several times, at very low level helicopters, low enough so they could see the pilot's face. So that's extremely low. I mean, very much lower than most aircraft fly in our airspace. Some people who study the UFO phenomenon say that what they're actually seeing is not really a helicopter, and it's some kind of screen memory, that the forces behind these particular objects have the ability to change the way we perceive things. So that's an interesting element there. So yeah, it's interesting that this person has just got in touch with me now.
Well, that's interesting to me because, I mean, as you well know, here in the United States, and it hasn't been as much recently, but I mean, 10 years ago, there was just a whole big thing about the black helicopters, harassing people. But, there's been a number of cases that really weren't that widely known publicly of UFO witnesses who found themselves, spotting unusual helicopters over their houses on a daily basis that had never been there before. I mean, before their say like a UFO encounter or whatever, and where you said that they were low enough that they could see the pilots' faces. I mean, I know that I've talked to a couple of people who said the exact same thing, that these helicopters would hover over their house or their backyard, and that they were so low, not only could they see the pilots' faces, but if they had, say, like a rock or a softball, that they could have lobbed it up and hit the pilot. It was that close.
Very strange, isn't it? And I've heard many reports like this, and it's disturbing that these kind of discussions, these kinds of sightings report often are associated with the very sinister mutilation phenomenon that Timothy mentioned. It's a very, very worrying thing, and of all the animals that are affected by this, you have farm animals, wild animals, pets, marine mammals. Mm-hmm. Homo sapiens is not exempt, and so there's a guy called Tony Dodd who's he's a ufologist in Britain, and Britain seems to be particularly affected by this. He actually passed away, sadly, but he had a friend who he interviewed and was featured in his book, who claimed to have been involved in this because the government used to actually take an interest in this, and they used to send in special forces units to cover it up and clear away the evidence. And this man was involved in one of these cleanup teams. And he's recently came forward again with another researcher, Richard D. Hall. So now this is very, very worrying indeed. And we don't know why. We don't know why, who, or what is doing this. Some people say it's a secret government experiment. Well, I don't know, because if you want to get hold of farm animals for experiments, it's easier and quicker and cheaper simply to buy them from a market like everyone else does. So I don't know. There's no real reason. People say the aliens are harvesting DNA. Well, why can't they just take a hair off our head like the police do? You don't need to cut huge areas out of a person's body to take their DNA. It's a very strange case.
We had a fellow on, retired police officer, who they found a body on top of the coal pile that was up about 13 feet, the railroad yard, and there was no other way that it could have gotten there, presumably. I mean, because it was a rainy night, and anyway, the body might have been, he suggests, dropped from somewhere up above, and I believe Tim wasn't the individual who was found. Wasn't part of his skull or his top part of his head crushed in?
He had some kind of unusual wounds that really was not specified, I guess, for whatever reason. I guess it was classified, but they were wounds that were unusual enough that.
And his last name was Adamski?
Adamski, yes.
Sigmund Adamski, yeah, not George Adamski.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with him.
Well, no relation. Although I have done a little bit of research, and the name Adamski is a lot more common in England than it would be here in the U.S. So
was this Alan,
I don't think it's
Alan Godfrey you had on the show? Was it?
Alan Godfrey. Yes, that's correct.
That was a strange case because the guy literally been dropped. Now, I mean, it could have been a helicopter that deposited him there. There's no other vehicle I can think of that could actually deposit a man on top of a coal pile without leaving black footprints everywhere. But a helicopter's very noisy, and this was in Todmorden, a very, very busy, bustling, tightly packed town where it would have woken people up. You know.
And of course, he had a UFO abduction of his own. Sometime after he investigated this incident when he was still in the police force.
Very famously, yes, he went on television and talked about it. And
we only get the best. We only get the best guests.
I know, it's very true. That's why I'm here.
That's right. But it was like you were saying. I mean, some of these circumstances are so bizarre that they really don't seem to have any meaning. You know, it's like you were saying that, Mr. Adamski, I mean, he could have been dropped onto the coal pile from a helicopter, but why? I mean, you're talking about, say, like, cattle mutilation or, animal mutilation, that, if there were some kind of like government research to look for, say, like radiation in the environment or some kind of contamination in the environment, why go and steal somebody else's cattle when you can have your own out in a field someplace and, do experiments on them with nobody noticing?
It's like we're dealing with a mindset, really, which is it's hard to anthropomorphize,
That's right. All right. Well, we are at our top of the hour break, so when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with our most excellent guest on Exploring the Bizarres. Stay tuned.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking with Ben EMLYN-JONES and Michael SCHRATT. And Michael, I want to ask you, a couple of years ago, there were a couple of photographs taken by civilians of some unusual triangle-shaped aircraft flying over. I think one of them may have been shot over Colorado and the other one over Arizona. And the press made a big deal of it for about a few days, and then that was the last anybody ever heard about that. Are you familiar with the situations I'm talking about?
Yes, I am. That was something that Stephen Douglas was involved in. He's another black aircraft researcher.
Yes.
What they looked like were perhaps 2 to 3 B-2s flying in formation, but it had a different trailing edge, and they were almost translucent, indicating the possible use of electrochromic panels.
Now, okay, explain to us what electrochromic panels are, because I know you had referred to those earlier.
Yeah, this is a technology where they take an image of what's above an aircraft, they electronically transfer it to the bottom surface, allowing it to essentially blend in with its background, causing it to become almost invisible. So that could be what we're looking at now. There's another technology called flickering skins. And so at this point, we've reached the point where they can do a desert storm strike, but not in nighttime, but they can do the same mission in daytime now. They've got daytime stealth technology.
Well, I know that there have been a number of eyewitness reports of people seeing, like the giant black triangles flying over their house, and they would say that they could see the outline, but it looked like that they were projecting like the star field on the underside at them. But they could still tell the difference, especially when the triangle was so close to the ground that they had an almost oppressive feeling.
That is exactly how Officer Craig Stevens describes the January 5th Southern Illinois flying triangle. That's basically his words exactly, that it was trying to mimic the star field above it on the underside. So this was January 5th, 2000. There were also interesting, kind of a mechanical structure was seen on the bottom, referred to as Legos, or was and then this particular craft, when it departed like a spark off a grinding wheel and left no sonic boom signature.
All right, so this really interests me because we have stealth technology, the B-2 bombers, and I mean this was something that was being worked on. Was it as far back as the early 1970s with the was it the Have Blue aircraft? Is that am I correct with that?
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
So now we also then, seemingly at the same time, we have these really massive triangle-shaped aircraft that seem to be working on a completely different type of technology. So, I mean, are we seeing aircraft being developed, say, by the same company, by Lockheed, but they're just, they're using, one of them's using conventional jets and the other one's using, God knows what?
I think it's a mix. It's multiple different contractors. The UK, they have their own triangles as well. But when you look at the eyewitness testimony, they keep describing the same thing. These tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of the craft, and then this low-frequency electrical humming noise like a transformer or a sewing machine is reported in multiple different cases. So we've got Belgium triangle, we've got Southern Illinois triangle, we've got Hudson Valley boomerang 82 to 89. What I think they're doing is they're using these tubes, pipes, and cylinders as a liquid nitrogen cooling device to turn the entire bottom surface of the craft into a superconductor. That's what I think you're using.
And the Hudson Valley, UFOs. I mean, that was quite a while back. So this is a technology, though, that has been around for quite a while.
It's been around for 35, 40 years. We're approaching. We're looking at almost 4 decades. They've been doing this now. So it's a proven technology. It's definitely something that they've perfected at this point. And not off the subject. You were talking about Cash Benjamin incident. December 29th, 1980. Number one, the Air Force tried to buy Betty Cash's vehicle, if you're aware of that, but they actually tried to buy her car. And number two is, immediately after the incident, the Army Corps of Engineers, using backhoes and bulldozers, they dug up the black scorch part on the road, and then 2 weeks later they did it again. They did it twice.
Well, and I mean, the Cash Landrum case. I mean, it's famous because whatever this craft was. I mean, it was emitting a lot of heat, maybe radiation as well. Who knows? I do know that the heat was so intense that one of the ladies, she was grasping the dashboard in fear, and then afterwards noticed that she left an imprint in the dashboard of her hand. It had gotten that hot.
Yep, that was Vicky Landrum. And then when Betty was walking back to the driver's side door, she put her hand on the door handle and she burned her hand. And they had to put the air conditioning on in December when she got back in the car.
So, what would you say then are some of your favorite cases? I mean, I know that you've talked about the reference librarian triangle. Why don't you tell us about that one? I found that one a fascinating story.
Sure. Credit has to go to Linda Zimmerman for that particular case. In this incident, the primary eyewitness, as we mentioned, who was a reference librarian, was waiting for her husband to pick her up, and she noticed a massive black 75-degree swept-wing isosceles triangle hovering near her location. She described it as being a football stadium length. So we're looking at 800 feet across, black. It had a interesting retina on the bottom of it that basically opened up, and from the back of the craft came this red orb that turned around and went up inside this iris. But before this iris closed, she got a look on the inside, and basically she said it looked like stacked apartment complexes or these terraced apartment complexes. So this is where the primary eyewitness got a look inside the vehicle.
Okay, so an aircraft that size, where would you keep it during the day? Because you were talking about the Southern Illinois Flying Triangle, and I know that there is an Air Force base fairly close to where the police saw that. But some of these other craft,
you would think that people would see it taking off and landing. Even in the case of the Westchester, they said it was ultralights, but nobody ever saw them land anywhere. I mean, these things just fly around and then they vanish. Now at Area 51, there's supposed to be an underground hangar or underground base there, and we've heard, of course, up in the Dulce, New Mexico area, these things fly right into the side of the mountains, supposedly.
Mm-hmm. So just to get back on this case took place 1985, November, Yorktown Heights, New York. So this is, basically right around the Taconic State Parkway area where a lot of these sightings occurred. Now, getting back to where it was stored, that's a very good question. I just like to point out that if this is a USO, it wouldn't need a hangar. It could be stored underwater. No one would ever know the difference. I know that's a long shot, but we can't rule it out. It could be a USO.
Well, and that kind of makes sense. I was listening to somebody talking about that subject the other day. Talking about, say, like the secret space program, whether or not we've got spaceships that go beyond, say, like the space shuttle or the conventional liquid fuel or solid fuel rockets. And they were just saying that that basically. Some of these crafts could be almost like a submarine, except it would be taken into outer space. So, I mean, to say that some of these triangle-shaped aircraft, especially the big ones, could be stored underwater, I mean, that makes sense.
Yep. I've got another case here. This came from David Marler. It didn't get into his book. But this is August 25th, 1990, near Barnsley, England, Woodhead Pass. A gentleman was coming out of a Fleetwood Mac concert. His was in the passenger side, and off the triangle 200 feet side. There was a light at each corner and then an indented section in the center with another white light. And then he said that along the inner wall of this indented section was this cross-beam and girder construction like a truss bridge. That's something that we've heard over and over and over again. I've got his written report here. I won't read the whole thing, but let me just hit you with what he said here. Quote, the side of the craft appeared to have several illuminated windows, and at one of the windows I saw 2 to 3 figures that appeared to be human. Certainly nothing about the figures made me think they were anything other than human, reinforcing my belief that the craft was a military project.
Mm-hmm. When we were talking earlier about the more conventional, I suppose, now they're conventional, like a stealth aircraft, and then these, the black triangles and the boomerang shaped crafts, using, like a completely what we call, non-conventional propulsion system. Have you run across any paper trail to see where this research and development may have originated from? I know that what was his name? Nick Cook had traced some of this as far back as as Nazi Germany, and that there was a lot of research going on in the United States in the 1950s when suddenly it all just seemed to disappear. So I mean, have you been able to make any headway on that?
I did some digging on gravity research as early as 1955 and came up with a whole series of newspaper clippings that definitely indicate that somewhere around October 1954, 1955 time frame, it looks like they made a breakthrough. That's what the newspaper clippings report. Multiple different aerospace contractors and universities were working hard to, quote, break. Aircraft company was one of them. Lear, but some kind of breakthrough was made.
We're breaking up there. We're having a hard time hearing the last statement. Can you just repeat the
Sure.
last part of that?
Yeah, sure. The newspaper clippings indicate that they were working hard to break the gravity barrier. Somewhere around 1955, Bell Aircraft was definitely involved, according to the newspapers.
And you said Lear as well?
Lear as well. That's mentioned in the report as well.
Mm. Well, and again, and I'm sure the people have asked you this to the point where you're probably sick of it. But if we have that kind of technology, why do we still have conventional jet aircraft flying around?
Yeah, because it's profitable for Lockheed Martin to do it. Continue cranking out these conventional birds if it's still profitable for them to do it. That's what they've done. In fact, the fixes on the aircraft are more profitable than the aircraft itself. We're looking at about $170 billion over budget, 8 years behind schedule. They're just cashing in on that program.
Hey, Ben, I want to ask you now. The British government, over the course of a dozen years or so, released what they claim are all the files that they have on UFOs. Do you think that they have other files that they are keeping hidden from the public, and some of these files may contain reports of this nature of devices that we're talking about?
Oh, there's absolutely no doubt. I mean, it's true there has been a large release of files from the Ministry of Defence. These are sightings report from the UFO desk. That's SCHRATT AS2, famously run by Nick Pope for many years.
Oh, yeah.
Yet I know many people who've written into the various government departments asking for more information on this subject, the Ministry of Defence and others, and been sent back a reply which says Section 26 not in the public interest. This essentially is a brush off. This means that essentially it doesn't matter if you're using the Freedom of Information Act. It doesn't matter. In the interest of well, they say the public interest. I think they mean their own interest. Quite frankly, it's an Orwellian statement. But there's no doubt they are holding back information, and they're not obliged to, from their point of view, on a legal standpoint, to provide us with it. So yeah, there's an awful lot of sightings, and including some people I know who've seen some strange things. I've seen some odd things in the sky. Like I say, it's an open secret. Not all of it is available to the public. When the government investigate, like Michael was talking about, the attention that the Cash Landrum case generated from the authorities after it happened, digging up the road, wanting to buy the car, etc., etc. It's pretty clear that they are very, very, very interested in this. They're spending a lot of money on something which they laugh at and say doesn't exist. So I think obviously there's going to have to be a major political shift before any further information actually comes to pass through the public lips.
Well, Michael mentioned that some of these craft could be hiding under sea. In fact, we're working on a book on UFO bases, some of them underground, some of them under sea. But of course, we have places like Area 51 and perhaps even Edwards Air Force Base, where some of these things could be stored underground. Now, there's also in, I think, Australia, Pine Gap, is it?
Pine Gap.
How about the UK? Do we have bases where these things could be hidden there?
There are several facilities in the United Kingdom which are equivalent of, say, Area 51. There's a place called Boscombe Down, which is where a lot of experimental aircraft are developed. Unfortunately, we have a much denser population here in Britain. We only have about quarter of a million square miles, but we've got 70 odd million people here, so it's more difficult to hide things than it is in the United States, where you have a much sparser population and lots of areas which are completely uninhabited, basically.
Oh yeah.
So I think it could be that some aircraft that have been kept at Boston Down and maybe tested at night are kept there. Yeah. As far as the unidentified submarine object or submergible object goes, yeah, I mean, these are things that come in and out of the sea. They appear to be the same thing, actually, because they sometimes are seen flying and then enter the sea. These have been reported for a long time. Even Christopher Columbus saw one of these objects when he was on his famous voyage to discover to head for the New World. And he describes of what would definitely very, very similar to what was seen much more recently, say, at the Shag Harbor event in Canada, where a very strange object was seen, and the Royal Canadian Navy investigated that. Sort of brightly lit, comes in and out of the sea. Bill Cooper, the famous guy who wrote a conspiratorial book, he saw one from the deck of his submarine when he was in the U.S. Navy. He said it didn't make a splash. It's almost like there's a kind of superfluid effect of its hull. It just went in and out of the sea, and he was told he was debriefed very violently and aggressively by these guys in dark suits, saying, "Don't tell anyone what you saw." So there's it's hard to know. It's hard to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I do remember being in contact with someone there in the UK a couple of years ago who claimed that they knew about an underground base fairly similar to Dulce. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, there are several places.
Yeah.
There are several places that people have claimed that there are underground bases, including one not far from me, actually, in Berkshire, which is supposedly underneath the village of Peasmore. I've actually been to investigate that myself, and I couldn't find a lot of evidence. However, I did see that one of the entrances to this base is supposedly a place called the it's basically a laboratory at the Harwell Institute, which is in Oxfordshire, and I saw a large mound of earth there, which is not marked on any maps. It's about 150 feet high. Looks like spoil from underground diggings, if you ask me. I can't prove that. I can't prove that's what it is.
But have people seen objects coming in and out of that area underground?
Oh, there's a lot of there's certain areas where you have UFO flaps. There were certain places such as the North Sea coast of Suffolk and Norfolk and that area, which is where Rendlesham Forest is. There's certain hotspots where you get a lot. Scotland, in particular, is extremely active in UFO terms. I think for its size and population, more so than anywhere else in the world, there's an area called Bonnie Bridge, where there's a massive flap there in the 1990s, and people were seeing strange things in the sky almost every day. I don't know though. I mean, I don't know whether these. As I said, it's hard to say if you bring in the element of high technology. How many of these things are extraterrestrial? How many of them are made by the breakaway civilization, as Richard Dolan calls it? And as Michael said, it's almost like when you see these things, you don't know. It's hard to, and there's a hardcore, maybe they're extraterrestrial, and I accept that. I think I've no doubt that some of them are extraterrestrial when you see strange beings and abductions and things like that associated with them. But there's no doubt that there is a secret state within the overt state, which it's not just politically different, it's technologically different. They live in a different world.
Well, now, would you say that the same secret group in the U.S. here would be the same secret group that's in operation in Britain, or is it a totally different?
We hear the word like deep state nowadays quite a lot in the media, but it's not a new idea. And it seems when you regard certain policies that seem to be almost that do seem to be international, appear in different states, overt states at the same time. It is like there's some kind of super government, and particularly when it comes to the crash retrievals of issues to do with the salvaging of strange objects that come down to the Earth. And Roswell is the most famous, obviously.
Well,
there are many other examples.
You just wrote a book about Roswell, a novel.
3 books. I've just finished the third book of the trilogy, which is about I love writing. Yeah, but it's a speculative fictional piece about what would happen if we had essentially truth instead of lies.
Well, I'm going to have to interrupt you guys here because it's time to go to our bottom of the hour break. We'll continue this conversation with Ben and Michael and Tim on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the final segment of Exploring the Bizarre. And Tim, this has been a fascinating show. I'm sorry that we're rapidly running out of time here. So I guess we need to ask Ben about, you have been doing some research into cryptid creatures there in the UK?
Well, I can't claim credit for the actual research myself.
Yeah.
But I have been interviewing and I've been interviewing several people, and I've been talking to many people. I'm very interested in this subject. But there's several individuals such as Deborah Hatswell and Chris Turner who have been researching, and indeed Chris is making a documentary film all about this called Elusive, which is about various the cryptozoology of the United Kingdom, which is quite substantial considering that we don't have the big open spaces quite on the scale of the United States that we were talking about in the last segment. Chris has been on the search of what can only be described as Bigfoot-like creatures, and of course the Loch Ness monster, the most famous cryptid in the world. He's very, very interested in this sort of thing, and I am too. I mean, and I think there is in our little densely populated island, there are still things hiding out away from public sight. So I'm very interested in that.
Well, I know the UK is also famous for its big cats, its mystery big cats that have been sighted really, all over the place.
Yes, I mean, there's actually no doubt that these creatures exist. I mean, they have been positively identified in terms of footprints. Fur has been found that has been tested for DNA, and sometimes there are attacks on farm animals. Sheep in particular seem to be targeted by these creatures, which you'd expect. If a large predator, a feline predator, was living in Britain, you'd expect that. And the way that the sheep are attacked and the injuries they suffer on the bodies indicates that there is a large feline creature, several actually, living in Britain. And where they come from, it's possible they are leopards, pumas, and other type creatures that have escaped from zoos, or from maybe some brought them over and thought they were pets. But of course, you can't make pets out of these creatures, and let them free. They seem to be thriving even in our cold climates, when these creatures often live in hotter weather. So they seem to have adapted.
Well, I know at sometime in the past, and what was it like? It was 1950s or something like that, where they passed a law saying that people could no longer keep exotic pets like that, and there was rumors that a lot of these people just took these cats and just released them out in the wild.
Yeah, and then there was I think they risked a heavy fine or even imprisonment if they were caught. So they thought, let's just let the animals go, and then I can just pretend I never had them. So that could have been that particular piece of legislation that led to this phenomenon. So far, there's not been an attack on a human that I'm aware of. It's not been reported.
Well, I have read a couple of cases of people being scratched, like joggers and people like that. Say like a cat would jump them and scratch them up a bit. But unlike the United States, especially out in California, where there's been a number of deaths from the mountain lions there. But yeah, you're right. As far as we know, there hasn't been any human that we know of deaths. But I'm also fascinated by the reports of Bigfoot-like creatures there in the UK, because of all the places you wouldn't expect those types of sightings. Just like you said earlier, I mean, you've got a small island, big population of people, yet there are numerous reports of Bigfoot type creatures.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is incredible. And I started getting into this when I met a lady called Charmaine Fraser, who had seen one when she was in Angus, Scotland, and when she was a young girl. Scotland is actually, there's more open space in Scotland than there is in England, but these things have been seen in England as well. Now, it's incredible when you think about it, and I know there's a lot of cryptozoologists who are deny this, and indeed there's a lot of controversy within the research community over this, because there's several people who say no, these are not cryptids. These are actually some form of paranormal phenomenon, like a ghost. It's something more associated with that. But having looked at this, I think there is, based on research done by Deborah Hadswell in particular, I think there is likely to be some kind of large creature that's obviously something that is elusive and is keeping out of people's way within Britain. I mean, it's incredible when you think about it, but there's so many sightings and so many other signs that these things exist that it seems that they are living basically in wooded areas, and they're keeping away from towns. They are clearly an intelligent creature. They're a primate, so they're some type of ape. And of course, we know that primates are highly intelligent. We ourselves, as humans, are are part of that family of primates. Now, they walk along railway lines apparently, because what's happened in Britain is that we've got the Greenbelt laws, which means there's a lot more woodland in this country now than there was, say, 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it seems that the population of these creatures is responding in kind, and there are now a lot more sightings of these. So I mean, I love to see one. I know whenever I walk through the woods, I walk through in a different. I think very differently about the British countryside now than I used to. I always thought of Bigfoot as something associated with North America, and I know that people have seen them in the woods up your way, but in Britain, that's incredible. I do look around myself whenever I'm walking along a pathway.
Heck, they've even been seen driving UFOs. We had well, you laugh, but we had a report that was given to me in earnest many years ago, and this was on the internet. A fellow was driving along in the evening, and it was a kind of overcast, a little bit foggy on the road, and he saw this a globe-shaped object that was transparent, and inside at the control panel was some big hairy beast.
There was
Boswick was his name, Mr. Boswick.
There was an incident in 1965 at a place called Presque Isle on the shores of the Great Lakes in Pennsylvania, where two things happened. A UFO landed. This was on like the beach at the lake, and some people in a car were sort of sitting there late at night. And at the very same time, a Bigfoot-like creature came out of the woods and attacked the car, and it scratched the car, and the scratches are actually on the car. So that's evidence. Now, these two things might be coincidental, but I mean, it seems odd that the UFO landing and the appearance of the Bigfoot would happen together. So it could be that some Bigfoot sightings Oh, obviously, like, as with the flying triangles, we may be talking about several different phenomena that we've
Yes,
categorized
yes.
together incorrectly. But
Uh-huh.
some of the Bigfoot sightings might actually not be of this world. I know that the Indians talked about the Sasquatch, which
Oh,
they
yes.
described as like a subtle being,
Uh-huh.
almost like a
Well,
something divine.
we've had on. Let's see. Paul Eno is one of our regular guests, and he's been camping out in the woods there in Pennsylvania, and they've had low level UFO sightings at the same time that Bigfoot has been leaving footprints in the earth not too far away. Now, I remember a case, and I've mentioned this before on the air, Athens, Ohio, which is right across the bridge, actually, from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, home of the famous or infamous Mothman. And I went out there one time, many, many years ago, to investigate a case where something had landed in the cornfield behind a gentleman's home. His teenager had seen this thing land, and it had left an impression in the corn and so forth. And I figured, well, I got some time on my hands. Let me go out and scour the neighborhood and see if other people had seen UFOs on this night in particular. Well, there had been other UFO sightings, although I don't know as if they necessarily tied in with this supposed landing in the cornfield. But one woman said, "Oh, yeah, UFO. I remember seeing one, not too far in the distance. But you ought to come around here sometime at night. Bigfoot stomps around behind my air conditioner." I said, "Yeah, Bigfoot stomps around behind your air conditioner." Says, "Yeah, he seems, I don't know, goes back there to either wash off or the condensation of the water, or to grab himself a quick." Rusty drink or something like that. I don't know. Of course, it's Ohio. You never know what's in the water system there. So I don't know. I mean, you do have a lot of these reports that do seem to be simultaneously in the same area.
That's very interesting, because you have like the corn, the thing in the corn sounds like rather like the crop circle, which of course the west of England is
this would have been, well, before there were crop circles, there were indentions in the ground, and I remember in Australia there were what they called saucer nests. Now these things weren't like. Well, what do you make of the crop circles? I mean, to me they seem a little bit homemade, of course, in some cases.
Oh, some of them are. There's no doubt that they're man-made. It's a phenomenon that's kind of landscape art. I know several people who do it, actually.
Yes.
But there is a genuine phenomenon alongside it. I mean, the crop circles appear to be just one phenomenon of many, one manifestation of many types of things in terms of strange objects appearing in the landscape, which are not made by human hands. And I mean, you mentioned the nests in Australia. I mean, these have been. The Aborigines have been talking about this since ancient times. They've said that these nests appeared, and that's the one genus, which is their word for the creator in their creation mythology. These creatures, they're like aliens almost. And
no, I just got something here from one of our previous guests, Donnie Brooke, who is the retired wrestler, and he's investigated the UFOs down there in the Carolinas. But he sent me some photographs that look pretty impressive of a V-shaped craft over Wisconsin. This must be in the last couple of days or so. So we do get the information as it comes in. I don't think there's any hairy creature seen in connection with this. But look at that. There's your darn triangle-shaped object. Which two lights on each end of the kind of boomerang, and then a solid object right up there in front in the middle of the object.
Breaking news there, isn't it? And
it's breaking news.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Tim. You were talking about the fact that this was near Point Pleasant, and I find that interesting because Of course, I've read John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies, and what's incredible about that phenomenon is you get almost everything you can imagine if you're interested in this kind of weird stuff in the same place at the same time. It's like a cornucopia. You have UFOs, you get Men in Black, you have strange creatures, you get time slips and spatial anomalies and all kinds of things. And now we have
of course the collapse of the collapse of the bridge on Christmas week. That might have been predicted by Indrid Cold or some other entity, or a voice in the night. Yeah,
it's exactly that's weird coincidence, isn't it? And now we have Bigfoots hanging around air conditioners. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
Well, some people might be able to.
There are. Yes, I mean, of course, there are people who make up tall stories, but I mean, it can't. I mean, the skeptics will say that explains the entire phenomenon. It's just a big fantasy. Well, I completely disagree, and I think anyone who's listened to this show will have to agree with us, I think.
Hey, Tim, I wanted to ask Michael real quick before we run out of time. I understand that you have produced some models based on some of these triangle UFO cases.
That is correct.
And what are these models? I mean, you're talking about like plastic models, or are they paper, or what's the deal?
They're cardstock models that I've made available to the public so you can build your own. Quick example, the case we just talked about in 1990 from Bardsley, England, I made one of that. Also made one of the Northrop XST. I made one of the just reported researcher on the case we just talked about with the reference librarian. I made a model of that one and many other different triangulars that I've been able to make a model of.
So now, where can people go to find these to build their own?
You can go on my Facebook page and just request it from there, and I'll send you a copy of the blueprints.
Oh, fantastic! All right. So, what about have there been any recent cases that you've looked at that have really stood out to you?
I can't say there's been any recent cases. More of the historical cases between, say, 82, 89 Reagan administration type area. A couple in the 90s, but basically just the Reagan administration is where I focus most of my attention.
Right. Well, but I mean, there has to have been new developments since that time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Well, okay. Now, Ben was talking about the secret space program and everything like that. So, and President Trump has talked about creating the Space Force. I mean, do you think that this has already happened? That we already have our own secret Space Force?
Yeah, I think it's already a done deal. Just looking at the cases from January 5th, 2000, Southern Illinois, going back to Belgium Triangle, Hudson Valley Boomerang, the Cash Landrum incident. We talked about that as well. There were 23 Chinook double rotor helicopters following that, including at least one gunship and a Sikorsky sky crane. So there was military involvement there. That's not the only time these helicopters have been seen ushering or following these different crafts. So there's absolutely military involvement. They've made the breakthrough.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a case, and our producer said that there was one in Las Vegas, I guess, where something was seen to come down and was carted away by, I think it was a Chinook helicopter. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that one, but there's a historical legacy of these military helicopters following or ushering these different craft. So there's a history there.
All right, fascinating. So, Ben, now talking about then the secret space program, as you had referenced before. oh gosh, what was his name? Graham Birdsall. Are you familiar with him? He was
Yes.
the late publisher of UFO magazine. Now, Graham, I mean, he was a big believer that Great Britain was involved in some kind of secret space program, and that there could possibly have been launches somewhere, in the UK. I mean, he was working on that before he passed away, but I don't know if he had ever, pinpointed any possible, locations. I mean, do you think that that's possible? I mean, have you seen any evidence of this?
I don't know. There's obviously sightings of craft which could be counted as evidence.
Mhm.
Yes, I do. I think I take it very seriously indeed. Now, you might claim, I mean, many people have claimed that it's not possible actually to launch spacecraft from Britain because, well, it'd be too obtrusive. You'd need it would make a lot of noise, and of course you'd have like rockets going up. And then of course the answer to that is we're not talking about rockets here. The
Right.
rocket is it's like the sailing ship. It's like the log canoe. It is ancient history in terms of the real technology we're talking about here. The only reason we still launch rockets up into space with all the noise and the danger associated with them is because of what Michael was saying before, that the Lockheed, they basically and basically the whole network associated with that is keeping it from us. They're keeping it quiet. I mean, they may have motives beyond simply the financial, but whatever their motives are, they're not allowing us to use this technology. I mean, when I was writing my book, I had the 3 books that I've just written, the Roswell trilogy, I had to think about this. I think, well, what would happen if we did find out, if we were given this information, how would that affect the society we live in? So I take what Graham said very seriously. And where these craft are taking off from, there's sightings around certain areas, like I said. For example, in the north of England, certainly in the South Yorkshire area, there's West Yorkshire. Sorry, I think there's reason to believe there may be some kind of covert launch facility there, based on the number of strange craft that come in and out, especially the ones similar to what Michael was talking about. Barnsley, he mentioned the Barnsley. Well, Barnsley is in that area. It's South Yorkshire, but it is in that area. And he talks about a craft which does look to be as if it's some kind of secret government technology rather than something extraterrestrial. So where it is exactly, I don't know. It may be underneath one of the reservoirs if we're talking about USOs, because there's these huge reservoirs way up in the Pennine Mountains. No one really goes there. They're out of sight. Be the perfect place to put one of these things if they did have an underwater ability. So where it is exactly, I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's worth looking into. But Graham Birdsall was absolutely right, and I think he was on the right track before he sadly left this mortal coil.
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of the program, so I think that we want to go around and have you tell our listeners where they can find out more about you. Any upcoming projects, talks, lectures, things like that. So, Michael, let's start with you.
Yep, I just want to highlight the 2 crossword puzzles that I have available. You can just hit me up on Facebook. I'll send you a high-res 11x17 copy, and I'm offering $5,000 cash prize for the Ben Rich crossword puzzle, $5,000 cash prize for the B-2 stealth bomber crossword puzzle.
Where's my pencil sharpener?
And I know that you've got a number of articles on the Open Minds website that if people want to catch up on some of these just really fascinating cases that Michael has looked at, you can find them there. So any upcoming talks or lectures you're going to be doing, Michael?
No upcoming talks or lectures at this time. No.
All right. Well, and okay, Ben, what about you? Where can people find out more about you?
My website, which is HPANWO, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. There's an awful lot there, including, of course, you can now read the entire Roswell trilogy from beginning to end, because I've just completed the 3rd book. It's Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, Roswell Revealed, a world after disclosure, and Roswell Redeemed, humanity after disclosure.
And you've got one of the best video channels on YouTube. I mean, man, you've got action in the street there. I mean, you don't take no for an answer.
Thanks,
and,
mate. Yeah.
All you got to do is go to YouTube and type in your name or.
Yeah, I mean, or Panwo, HPANWO.
Yeah. We'll find. They'll find. If the New World Order can find you, our listeners will be able to find you. And speaking of
Yeah.
finding things, don't forget our YouTube channel, which is Mr. UFO's Secret Files, and we've got some great books out. We've got a trilogy of our own, Tim. Right? We've got Alien Bloodlust, which Scott Corrales just put together. He's the main contributor. We've got UFO Hostilities, and we've got that very special Screwed by the Aliens book. And each of these books, Tim, are they not almost 400 pages apiece? I mean, we don't
they
skimp.
are.
Oh man, we don't skimp. I saw the UPS driver came the other day with a box, and he was bent over. I mean, you can't. And you can get them at a discount. Of course, you can get them on Amazon.com. Just type in Timothy Beckley. I got an author's page. You'll find us there. We had 300 titles. But you can go to the conspiracyjournal.com, and there, right smack on that front page, is a special for those 3 books. It's a trilogy of horror, I called it. And so don't forget our YouTube channel. And I want to thank Tina, our producer, and Peter, our animator, and Helen, our photographer, and all of our regular listeners, and some that may be just tuning in for the first time. And don't forget to come on back to Exploring the Bizarre. That can be heard every Thursday night at KCORradio.com. It's exciting radio, Tim. Exciting radio. It's a podcast like nobody else has. I guarantee it. And happy holiday, by the way.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.